presentations. We've got item 3, Taveram, land between 73 and 91 Taveram Road, and we have Helen to present. Helen, over to you.
Wrong one, never mind, it's a good start. This application is relates to a field between 73 and 91 Taveram Road in Taveram. So we have got number 91 here, this is Taveram Road, and then number 73 here, and it's proposed obviously to have a dwelling in this location here. So just going through here, we've got the development limit here hatched in the orange hatch there. This is the site with the orange outline. Obviously we've got number 91, which is, if you've got a label on here, just to give you some clarity there. And then we've got number 73 down here. We've got a right-of-way which runs to the east of the site. As a bridleway, there's no there's public access for horses and pedestrians. There's no public vehicular access, but there is you can use a vehicle if you have a right of access. So these properties here, including the site, would have a vehicular right of access, so they can take a vehicle down, but it's not general vehicular access. Obviously we've got Max Lane here, which again is an adopted road, but it's unsurfaced, and Cossey Lane down here at the bottom. So just a Google image, so you've got a bit better context here. Here's number 73 at the bottom, 91 at the top, and the public rights of way there. This is a bit of a wider context. So again, here's Taveram Road up here, the footpath comes down. Here you've kind of got more of the river valley, and we've got the river Wensum flowing through here. And obviously over the other side of the river, then you've got Cossey and obviously Drayton right up here to the northeast. Okay, so just going back to the principle of the dwelling in this location, because we're outside the settlement limit. You are obviously aware that we've just adopted policy 7.5 in the new Greater Norwich Local Plan, which does permit self-build dwellings outside settlement limits, subject to a number of criteria. We also, this application was submitted before December, so in terms of the NPPF, we have to demonstrate that we have a 5-year land supply, and at this point in time we don't have the evidence to do that. So we will be engaging, as part of this application, paragraph 11 of the NPPF, which requires us to, in the planning balance, carry out a sort of a test to consider whether the adverse impacts of this development would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So we'll be concluding on that later on as we go back past. Just going back, obviously, in terms of connectivity, the site is well connected to the existing settlement. It's good access to services with by foot, cycle. There's also bus stops. You'll note in the update, actually, there is a bus stop on Shakespeare Way, which is slightly close because there is a cut through that I hadn't realised through into Shakespeare Road. So it's well connected in terms of its accessibility to services, etc. We'll just go a little bit through the design and then talk a bit about that. Obviously, you'll note from the previous things that actually a lot of these plots along Taveram Road is very much characterised by sort of large dwellings in big plots, and obviously we have a large, again, a dwelling here and a large plot below. So it is a contemporary dwelling, probably easier to see from these 3D images probably than the plain elevations. As you can see, it's sunk into the ground. The land, which you'll see on the photographs, rises from the bridleway up towards the west, so the land's higher level here also slopes down to the south as well. So it's intended that this dwelling will be built into the ground. It's obviously a contemporary approach with cedar roof, and it's also using a sort of an insulating concrete framework which has good thermal properties, etc., in terms of its eco credentials. I'll just flick through a few more of these 3D images. This one is basically from within the field, which is adjacent to the site. So you can see it's kind of set into the ground. Again, this is an aerial view, but just gives an idea of how it would set. The public right of way is obviously to the back there. You can see the properties there, number 91. So it's kind of set into the ground. So it's on 3 levels, but obviously we've got the lower ground floor here. We've then got a ground floor at this kind of level, and then there's a small section which would be at first floor level, but that's quite a small section. Okay, this is some 3Ds. So this is from the bridleway looking towards Taverham Road. So a hedge has been planted, as you'll see on the photographs. Obviously that will mature with time as well. And again, this is another one near the access, again looking north towards Taverham Road. There's a few internal views here, which are obviously probably less important for us, but just give a feel of that dwelling. Again, these are the elevations, which are, as I said, the 3Ds are probably slightly easier to understand in terms of the level changes, but as you can see, it's kind of built into the ground. And again, here are the sections. So the pink area is actually the existing ground level. So you can see how a lot of the accommodation is actually built into the ground rather than being above it. And here you can see, I'll just show you the floor plans. So the lower ground floor, we've just got accommodation in this section here. The ground floor goes all the way round, and then we've just got a small area of accommodation, and I've just noticed I marked that wrong. That's the first floor. So a small area of accommodation at a first floor level. It doesn't go all the way around. Okay. I think in terms of the design, your senior conservation design officer has commented on the application. Just in terms of the character of the area, we have got number 73 to the south. We have got, just going back, we have got wooded area to the east here, built form to the north. So in terms of that, we don't feel that it necessarily breaks out from that settlement area. It's also been broken up in terms of its design. It sits in the ground within the site. And is in a character area where we have got a number of, large dwellings in large plots. So in terms of that design, we feel that that's acceptable. It does have a number of eco credentials in terms of its energy efficiency. I think what we can't do is secure those by planning condition. So we've kind of left that as a neutral balance impact in terms of that planning balance, because the accreditation would be incredibly expensive and make it an unviable scheme. So that's a neutral balance, although obviously those eco credentials are a positive benefit. Just going back through here, well, we have had a landscape appraisal submitted with the application. We are in terms of our Broadland character appraisal, we are part of the Wensum Valley character area. Obviously, as part of the analysis that's being carried out as part of this appraisal, the consultants have kind of concluded that this kind of, the site itself is much more part of the wooded suburban character of Taverham necessarily than the kind of river valley marsh and character which is more down to the south. But we'll go through the photographs as we go. I think and as we go through the video, it's worth noting the topography, because this does kind of obscure views into that wider valley from the footpath along, or the bridleway along this point. So these are the various locations where the appraisal has taken place. So the first viewpoint 1 is at the top of Taveram, or the top of the bridleway. So I've just, on the photograph here, you've got Taveram Road behind you. So we're looking down the bridleway here. So the site is just on the right hand side. You wouldn't see the dwelling at this point. So going down to the next point, we are now located just before we get to the site. This appraisal was done before they'd planted the hedge. So there's another photograph to the south where they've just started planting the hedge. That obviously will grow up and help to obscure the impact at this point as time goes. So you would get a little bit of an impact from here. This is the site itself. As you can see, the land rises up. These properties along here are the ones on Taveram Road. They're more or less standing on the bridleway at the moment. So there's another photograph that I've taken at the bottom there. So clearly it would have an impact from this point of view. You would obviously see it, but it is an agricultural field. You don't get the kind of character of the river valley from this point. Again, this is viewpoint 4, which is taken just near number 73. So again, those are the properties to the north on Taveram Road. You can see how that land kind of rises up. So again, you would have a significant impact from this point, because obviously you would end up with a new dwelling. But you are obviously located on this part of footpath between 2 existing dwellings. This isn't a viewpoint, but it's one that I've taken, which is on that footpath. So again, as you can see, the land rises up. This is looking south, so these are the number 73 is behind those trees there. So as the land obviously rises up here, you don't get that wider view of the river valley. So it's largely off the field. Again, this is a little bit further down, and you will see that from this point. This is viewpoint 6, is to the south of number 73. It actually has, there's been a replacement dwelling built in number 73 since this photograph was taken by the consultant. But in terms of its impact, again, the new dwelling would be located behind this site, so from this point you would not see the new dwelling. Again, this is going down to Cossey Lane. So again, that's number 73. The site's located behind number 73 in the trees, so you wouldn't be able to see it. This viewpoint 8 is further along Cossey Lane here. Again, you can see the big pine conifer trees here. So the site is, and the dwelling would be located just behind that. Again, this is looking through the kind of a hedge area. So a lot of that would be obscured again. You'd possibly get very small glimpse views, but it would largely be screened within that wider landscape. This is a Max Lane, which again is, there is public access. This is within the gateway. So this is the site here. We can see the arrow. Obviously the land does drop again because we're at the other side. There is some potential for some kind of small amount of view in here, but again, it's kind of seen within that context of development in Taveram Road and number 73. Number 10, and this is again, Max Lane is largely got quite mature hedging along most of it. So there is that one gateway that we've just seen, but for the majority of walking along this, you won't be able to see those wider. You won't be able to see the site because of the hedging that is in place. Okay, just go back on that. So I think in terms of that landscape impact, I think because of the topography of the site and the fact that the land rises to the west, it does block views of the river valley, and it does also mean, along with the positioning with number 73, that the site is not seen within that wider river valley context. So the impact is therefore much more contained. Obviously, it will have an impact on from the bridleway, because there'll be a dwelling where there currently is one. I think that will reduce over time as the hedge matures, and that could obviously be put in place. So the hedge in itself doesn't need planning permission, and the dwelling is set back again from the bridleway. So again, it's not such an immediate impact. I think obviously it is the development of a site, so there is an element of environmental harm in terms of that. So in terms of the planning balance, we have identified some harm there, but not necessarily no significant harm on that wider landscape. The next main issue is in terms of highways, the site is accessed off the bridleway, which is then with the junction. So just here we've got, and you can just see from the arrows of where the access is on Taveram Road. Obviously you've got a tree here, which I'll come on to a bit later. So again, these are the views. I think obviously there has been quite a lot of concern raised about the use of this bridleway. In terms of the footpath here, these two photographs show looking towards the site. So we were at the with our back to Taveram Road, and then this third photograph is then looking the other way. So then looking back towards Taveram Road. It is an arrow, and obviously it is a bridleway. So the priority is obviously for pedestrians and horse access, and then vehicular access is limited to those with specific access, rights of access to take a vehicle down there. The highway officer has raised concerns, but feels that he can't raise an objection on the amount of traffic because there's only one dwelling. Okay. You'll note from the update sheet that actually I didn't think it would, but the bin lorry or the refuge vehicle does go down this on a weekly basis. The public right-of-way officer has raised an objection regarding the potential conflict and inconvenience of users of the public right-of-way. Obviously, you can't get vehicles to pass here, and obviously, if somebody was walking down here, they'd either have to get on the verge or there'd have to be some movement. So I think in terms of when we're talking about conflict and inconvenience and enjoyment of that, because vehicles are going to be going quite slowly down here, you can't go, you won't be able to go fast. I don't think there's any particular risk in terms of necessarily collisions and things like that, but it is kind of more of an inconvenience issue. Rather than necessarily a safety issue. So there is some potential harm, which we've identified as social harm in terms of that impact on the enjoyment of the bridleway. Okay. In terms of the trees on the site, these are the trees on the southern boundary. They wouldn't directly be affected by the development. We have proposed, and you'll note in the conditions, tree protection to ensure that they're not damaged at all during the construction process. These two trees, we've got trees along the southern boundary. These are no longer within the site because the site area has been reduced. Again, we can ensure that these are protected during that construction period, but there's no need for them to be directly affected by the development. We have got these two trees on the bridleway boundary. We have TPO'd them just recently since the report was written. You'll see that in the update sheet. Obviously, we had a tree that had been removed further down, not related to this development, but obviously there is some potential risk not associated with this development as such, but obviously we've lost one tree. There's potential to lose these ones as well. So these now have tree preservation orders on them, so you can just see them on the plan. In terms of the impact, in terms of this development, we already have the track in place. It's not going to be resurfaced or anything like that. We've already got that compaction, etc., in terms of that impact on tree roots, etc. So there's no need for any additional mitigation on these, and it is just to note really that they now have tree preservation orders on them to ensure their long-term retention. Okay, in terms of other issues, the site's not at risk of flood risk or any risk of flooding. It's proposed to have to deal with the drainage by suds and infiltration features. We don't have the exact details of that, and that would be conditioned. Ecology-wise, I think that we have a report that's been submitted that suggests enhancements and some mitigation. There is potential for habitat for badgers. They're very nomadic in nature, so there will be a condition for a badger survey to take place just before the development commences, in case badgers have kind of moved in. In terms of the heritage impact, there's not going to affect the setting of any listed buildings or conservation area. We have had confirmation from the Historic Environment Service that they wouldn't want any archaeological investigation on this site. Obviously, in terms of residential amenity, we've got sufficient distance, etc. So it's not considered that it will cause any particular amenity issues. Obviously, there will be some disturbance during construction, but that's obviously temporary in nature. We wouldn't look for a construction management plan on a one-dwelling site. We normally only use those on the much larger developments, but obviously in terms of environmental health, they do need to comply with that wider legislation. The site has been, the applicant has purchased credits to deal with the nutrient requirement, nutrient neutrality. That does require them to go to the sewer on Tavern Road. So that is conditioned as part of this, that they will have to connect to the sewer. And we await Natural England's comments on those, so the recommendation is subject to that. I think obviously, kind of concluding in terms of things, we do obviously have policy 7.5. In terms of the criteria in that, it is for less than 3 dwellings. The applicant is on our self-build, the Broadland self-build register, and it is obviously adjacent to the settlement limit as well. And it's considered that obviously, given the sort of character of large dwellings in big plots, that it would respect that character of the area and the densities. And as we've gone through the landscape assessment, we don't consider that it would cause significant harm to that wider landscape or the natural environment. In addition to that compliance and consideration of 7.5, we also have to engage the filtered balance. And obviously, as we've gone through, there are some harms. We have got the issue with this kind of potential conflict and the increased use of the bridleway. But given the number of vehicles from one dwelling and the fact that we've obviously got another dwelling already located, then we consider that harm to be relatively minimal in terms of that planning balance. Obviously, again, there is some environmental harm from developing a greenfield site, but obviously there isn't that wider landscape harm. So again, that is quite a small harm. We're weighing that against obviously some very small economic benefits in terms of general trade to services and facilities and construction jobs, to actually the provision of a self-built dwelling which would be secured as part of this application in a sustainable location. So in terms of that balance, then we consider that those harms don't outweigh the benefits. We have had a previous refusal on this site for a planning in principle back in, I think it was 2021. I think it's obviously worth noting what the differences are from this proposal to where we were with the refusal in 2021. Obviously, we've now got 7.5 adopted, and we don't have or for the purposes of this application, we can't demonstrate a land supply. When that previous application was determined, then we did have a land supply. This is also for a Pacific dwelling, and we've had landscape information submitted to help support that application. With a previous application, there were no details of the dwelling, so it was just for a dwelling, and consideration has been given to the specifics of this development. So on balance, taking into consideration the engagement of paragraph 11, then we'd recommend approval to the application, obviously subject to conditions. There'd also be a legal agreement in terms of the self-build. Obviously no objection coming back from Natural England. We've also got a consultation which I think expires at the end of the week, in terms of just ensuring that we've served notice on the owner of the loc here, because the applicant has a right of access but doesn't own that. So that's obviously subject to that coming back as well. Okay.
Thank you, Helen. It was a very detailed presentation. Does any members of the committee have anything, points they wish to clarify? Lana?
Chairman, thank you. Is that on? Yeah. My question is, with public right of way, is the objection, does that relate to the same bit of road, loc pathway that would be used by the refuse lorries as well? Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
So potentially we're seeing an increase of on recycling day, there's food recycling, normal recycling, garden waste collections, all going down that road.
Yeah, they currently go to number 73. I thought they probably wouldn't, but they do. So I've had that confirmed through our contract officer. So obviously, in terms of any refuge vehicles, then they would stop at this dwelling, as well as they go past it.
Okay. Yeah. So there's HGV movements there, as well as the 6 additional journeys.
Yes. In terms of the refuge vehicles, there wouldn't be any more refuge vehicles, because the refuge vehicle is obviously going down to number 73, so they would just stop as they were going down. So there wouldn't be any additional refuge vehicles, but obviously they would be vehicles going to the the dwelling that don't currently go down there.
And do they reverse that, or how do they get out?
I think they must have to reverse. That was a question that I asked, but there's nowhere to turn, so I presume they would have to reverse that. I think it is one of their narrower. It's obviously, we have a narrower vehicle, so it's not one of their biggest vehicles, but they would have to reverse out there. I can't see how you'd be able to turn.
And is there, for the construction period, clearly there's going to have to be excavation of a significant amount of material. Are those going to be removed by grab load, or how, or are we controlling that construction period in any way to reduce the size of vehicle that goes down that road?
We haven't got a condition in terms of the size of vehicle. I think they will be limited in terms of their size of vehicle and how they kind of manage that. With any construction site, obviously some are more constrained than others. So certain vehicles, they will have to plan as to what vehicles can access down through that site.
I mean, I'm just saying, just because it is so narrow and there's nowhere to turn at the bottom, would it not be sensible to put a limit on the size of vehicle going
I think
down
they
there?
would, but I imagine, and probably the agent can confirm this for you, but during that construction period, then they will obviously be able to turn within the site. So I don't think those necessarily the construction vehicles will be going reversing backwards and forwards. Obviously, with a refuge vehicle, then they don't go into people's gardens to turn round.
Okay, but as I said, just because it is so narrow and because it is a public right of way and because the size of, well, the width of the road is going to really restrict the size of vehicles, so it's not going to be a case of getting a big vehicle down there, taking away as much soil as possible and then leaving. It's going to have to be by the grab load, which means just more frequent movements, and that's why I'd like some consideration given perhaps to how we manage that for, you know, I know that it's for a temporary construction period, but for the safety of the people using it and the bridleway, etc. I would like, you know, just in this pause between now and then, perhaps to give some consideration how we manage that.
I guess we could look at not necessarily highway safety grants because the highway officer hasn't specifically requested it, but we could, given the nature of the bridleway condition, a construction sort of traffic management plan as to how they are, what size vehicles, etc., would access the down the bridleway. So potentially we can look at that as and put that on as a condition.
Maybe when the agent comes, Lana, you could ask them to clarify that. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Oh, Karen.
I had similar questions to Councillor Hempsall, so I won't repeat those. I'm just picking up on the point that you mentioned, Helen, about the 2 trees that have been TPO'd right. Yeah. Are they right in the immediate entrance, if I'm looking at the pictures correctly? My question while you're finding it is that I understand that's a relatively new condition, those TPOs, and looking at how narrow that access is, how could we adequately do the tree root protection, is my question.
Okay, so we couldn't put our normal tree fencing around there because obviously they're right next to the thing. I think there's 2 things that we kind of look with tree protection and things on sites. Firstly, there's obviously storing materials and things, or spilling concrete, or those type of things within the tree protect, which is where kind of we're looking at, particularly with the trees around 73 or whatever, that we don't get blocks and things stored in that area, which can obviously cause issues. In terms of the tree roots and things, actually, because we've got that compaction that's already there, the surface isn't changing, then actually the vehicles won't necessarily affect the root because that compaction has already occurred. Where it causes a problem, and why we like to obviously fence off areas, is if the ground hasn't been compacted and then suddenly you get things being put on it, then it obviously comes down and sort of compacts the roots. But when you've already got that compaction, those roots will have adapted to that over a period of time. So probably the actual roots on these trees will have gone more towards the garden of the dwelling and be less restricted in this area. So the trees will have done that over a period of time.
Eleanor.
Hi, yes, on page 38, paragraph 4.8, it says in the original proposal the site exceeded 0.5 of a hectare and would trigger an affordable housing requirement. Has that now changed with this proposal?
Yes, so this is plan at the end. I hope you can see it there. The site was originally, I can't remember the hectareage, But it did cover this whole field, which is in the ownership of the applicant, which would have obviously triggered an affordable housing contribution. So they made the decision to reduce the size of the site, so not to have that contribution. Obviously, it's still a site within it. It would have been a very big site previously, so we still feel it's acceptable in terms of that site, but reducing it to half a hectare means that it doesn't trigger that provision.
Okay, if we've got no further questions, I'm going to ask Richard Lowry to come forward, please, for public speaking. Richard, if you press the right-hand button, and you have 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman and Madam Chairman and committee. My name's Richard Lowry. I live at 93 Taverham Road, and for my 5 minutes, I'll present what I consider most important in terms of my objections. Location. The application states it's an infill. In my opinion, it is not, as all the adjacent developments are accessed from the Taverham Road as a ribbon development. The other dwelling using the bridleway is number 73, which is an anomaly. It's originally a market garden. It's been there since 1938, some 60 years before the track was classified as a bridleway. The plot is outside the development boundary of Taverham and is within the protected area of the Wensum Valley. Allowing building on agricultural land would set precedent for further development into the Wensum Valley. With respect to the design, an eco-friendly house must demonstrate that the benefits of the house, on balance of probability, outweigh the detriment to the environment and the landscape. The applicant has not yet provided any information as to how this development is an eco-dwelling. There is therefore no enforceable completion standard other than normal building regs. Neither has there been a statement on how the eco-dwelling benefits outweigh the damage to the landscape. The proposed hedging and the enclosure remove all west views from the bridleway. With respect to access, the track proposed for access is a public bridleway. Currently, house number 73 uses the track as an access because the dwelling predates a bridleway classification. The narrowest part of the track at the oak tree we've been looking at is 3.3 metres, with no passing point, and is therefore inadequate to support increased traffic. Increased vehicular use will, of this well-used bridleway, put pedestrians, pets and cyclists at risk, all three of which use it very much. To access the Taverham Road from the bridleway does not meet the legal requirements of what is called the visibility splay. The legal definition requires 43 metres of curb view, 2.4 metres back from the junction. As you've seen, there's an ancient oak tree and a steep incline preventing this. The applicant has not provided details or drawings as to how this requirement may be met. The track is not suitable for emergency vehicles or service vehicles, despite the best efforts of our dustbin men, the refuge people. And if it was made so, we would lose the bridleway and all the oak trees and all the boundary hedges. Opposition to the location. In the case of planning policy, none of the national local planning policy documents supports development in the location of the proposed application, and on balance there's no material justification in our opinion to approve this application. And of course, as you would expect, there's very strong local objection to this development with the Taverham Neighbourhood Plan, the Taverham Parish Council, unanimous vote, district councillors Clancy and Kelly, councillor Clancy, County Councillor Clancy, and the local Taverham residents, of which you've received more than 30 objections. I hope I've done my 5 minutes. Thank you.
Can I clarify one point? When it came to parish council, they had no objections to the thing. And are you aware of the adoption of the Greater Norwich Local Plan?
Well, only in as
7.5?
much as what Stuart Clancy has informed me of.
Okay, it's a shame Stuart's not here today.
Yes, he's doing something in Cossey.
Do we have any points of clarification for the speaker? No? Okay. Ms. Larry, if I could ask you to return to your seat. And I'm going to call Matthew Rook and John Boone. Nice to see you back here, Matthew. I'm sure you know the procedure. So 5 minutes from when you start speaking. Are you actually both speaking?
Yes.
Yes. Who's? Yeah, certainly. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Matthew.
Good morning, committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Matthew Rook, planning agent for the application, and I'd like to give you an overview of the proposal and address the key issues. I've also submitted on our comments on the committee report, and these have been added to your supplementary schedule. Planning application is for a single dwelling adjacent to the settlement limit of Taveram, being located between existing houses, as you've seen on the plans. We agree with your officers that the dwelling is in a sustainable location and it meets the 3 objectives of sustainable development. The proposal is specifically for a self-built dwelling for our clients who are totally committed to building and living in a modern home for them and their family on this site. They live and work locally and have bought the land and thoroughly researched the self-build issues in Broadland. They've worked on the design and the form of the dwelling with the architect to ensure the dwelling has as low an impact as possible in respect of its relationship to neighbours, the landscape and the environment, and to incorporate modern construction techniques to lower the carbon footprint and reduce its energy needs. The proposed dwelling has been positioned and designed so that there will be no significant adverse effect on the amenity of neighbours in terms of overlooking, loss of light and overshadowing. In addition, although the dwelling will not be visible from Taveram Road, its form and design are considered to accord with the established character of the area, which are large, individually designed houses set within substantial plots. You've heard from Helen about the landscape visual impact assessment. This describes the site as a visually well-contained site, contained by mature conifers to the south, residential development to the north, and a woodland to the east. The site's western boundary is open, but the land rises, as you saw on the photographs, to a crest on the field boundary. Approximately 600 metres to the west is the River Wensum, which is at a substantially lower level than the site. The change in site levels and the intervening mature vegetation, particularly along Max Lane, combine so that the site is not visible from the public vantage points within the Wensum Valley. It's important to note also the site is located outside of the area defined as the River Wensum Green Corridor within the Taveram Neighbourhood Plan. The LVIA concludes that although the site is identified in the Council's Landscape Character Assessment as being in the Wensum Valley, in reality it appears distinctly separate from it, being more in character with the housing on the edge of Taveram. Further landscape planting on the crest along the field boundary would actually enhance the landscape setting, and it's noted that the landscape impact section of the committee report agrees with these conclusions. As you've heard, the Highway Authority has no objection to the proposal to access the site by the bridleway, and recently government has increased the requirement for the provision of self-build housing, as councils must give permission for enough legitimate self-build housing schemes to meet the number of councils' self-build register. As a result, adopted policy 7.5 of the GNLP is the relevant policy. This permits small-scale residential developments, and these must be for people who meet the eligibility criteria on the council's self-build register and for development to meet design criteria. As you've heard, our client is on the self-build register, and the design has been carefully formulated to ensure that the design criteria are also met. Therefore, the proposed development complies with policy 7.5 and should therefore be approved to deliver a legitimate self-build dwelling. The committee report has also identified it's important to stress that the council is unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing supply for planning applications received before December 2023, such as this, and it's therefore necessary to assess the impacts of approving the application. The committee report has made this assessment and concludes the proposals are recommended for approval. You've heard our client has purchased the necessary nutrient neutrality credits. In conclusion, the proposal is acceptable in design and landscape terms, with no significant impact on neighbours or highway safety. The council is unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing for those sites submitted before December 23, and there are no adverse impacts which significantly outweigh the benefits of a legitimate self-build dwelling in this sustainable location. Furthermore, the proposal meets the requirements of adopted policy 7.5 of the GNLP and will deliver self-built home to contribute to the council's target. We therefore respectfully propose that planning permission should be granted in this case. Our architect will speak in a moment in relation to the design considerations and give the eco-credentials that was mentioned during the earlier presentation. Thank you.
Okay. I won't go over again many of the points that Matthew has clearly made and Helen has described in her presentation. There are a few points that have been raised by questions and by the previous speaker before Matthew. I'd just like to emphasize that the design is based on the whole building being lowered into the ground, and the way we've calculated that is by trying to balance cut and fill. So there may well be some variances, but by and large, most of the cut from the site, from the lower level, is going to be used to fill the upper levels. So there will be, of course, some trucks leaving the site, but not as many as it would have been with a conventional construction on the level ground. We will be happy with a construction management plan condition if you wish to impose that. We're quite happy to look into that and make proposals for what will be suitable for access to the site. I'm sure the contractor would want to do that in any event. In terms of the TPO trees, just to mention that we would make sure it's off our site, but we would make sure that any proposals would avoid any excavation or disturbance within the tree canopy and the root protection area. I'd like to elaborate a little bit further on the idea of the design, in particular the environmental aspects. I would like to refer again the speaker prior to Matthew to the design and access statement. He's obviously not seen it or read it, because we do go into quite a lot of detail about the environmental aspects of the design, which of course are intrinsic. They're not added on later, they're intrinsic in the way that the whole scheme was developed. The lowering into the ground approach is known as elevational bermed design. It's a slightly complicated name, but effectively it just means that the building is lowered into the ground, so it is open to the front, which we're very fortunate in this case is towards the south, so we get good light and solar gain in there, but it's sheltered by the earth around the other three sides. This means that you get all the benefits of the thermal capacity of the ground to reduce the energy needs day to day, or in fact month to month, of the proposals. It's known as passive annual heat storage, and actually that can reduce the energy needs of a dwelling by 60 or even 80%, depending on the construction and various site factors. So we've been extraordinarily lucky well, not lucky, I'm sure it was a very skilled purchase, but very lucky that the slope of the site is towards the south and towards the east, because we're able to kill two birds with one stone, if you like. We're able to sink the design into the ground, so we get the benefits of the elevational bermed approach. And also, at the same time, we're able to reduce the impact of that from the residents to the north in terms of overlooking. So instead of having a partially 2.5-story dwelling sitting on the same level, we have virtually nothing visible towards the north, or a very small amount of banking. The construction method will be I think you mentioned it, Helen, the reinforced insulated concrete formwork. And that's ideal, of course, for building retaining walls because you actually cast the concrete against the ground. And that gives you your insulation values as well as your retention. We would look into low Portland cement concrete to try and be more environmentally friendly. It's SEM-free is an example. It uses products such as blast furnace slag and pulverized fly ash and so on to reduce the amount of Portland concrete in the cement, in the concrete. So we hope it will be a very environmentally friendly construction. Very good. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Any questions, Lana?
Yeah, the way we design these days is with 3D modelling. When I say we, it's not me so much. I'm not so much on the computer, but the whole scheme is developed in a 3D model. And what we would do is simply adjust it, not relative to a ground zero, but just relative to the slope of the site, where we can raise or lower it in order to minimize the difference between the cut and fill. So it's all done based on topographical surveys and so on. So it's quite a technical process that we'll be engaging in when we move to the next stage.
And can I just add, there is a condition that's been suggested in relation to the finished floor level. So once John's done his work on the computer, then obviously we can then come back to the officers to submit those details and work it up that way, so you get a working diagram to show the on the ground context of the site, taking into account condition 3 on your agenda.
Shall I go first? We've looked at it fairly carefully already, and the floor level that we have given is there or thereabouts. And if you want some undertakings about variations from that floor level, a maximum, I'm sure we can figure something out. But it's going to be in our interest to try and get the maximum environmental effects of the berming. We don't want to go higher and lose all the benefits that we're gaining. And also we don't want to go higher because that will make it more visible to the surroundings. So we want to minimize it. And we reckon the figures we've given are pretty close. But obviously when you get to the technical stage, you go into in a bit more detail and there might be some adjustments here or there.
Helen, did you want to come back on that?
I think we can, this is obviously around it, we have had a full topo survey carried out, and obviously it is modelled. So there'll obviously be some areas here where it's obviously increased, because this sort of pink grey line here is the ground level. So there will be some increases where we've got brown, which are coloured brown here, and obviously we've got some digging out here. So these are only on various sections. So I think it's very difficult for me to say that there won't be anything, that it'll all be accommodated. There may well be some soil that needs to be removed. I think that would have to be worked out in the technical detail. But I think what we can say, it's not just a case of we're digging a hole here and not all of it is going to then leave the site. Obviously some of it will then be moved, so that it's then creating these little brown bit, which are put in brown here. So, you know, I think in terms of that final detail, no, we don't know exactly how many lorry loads of soil will need to be removed, but it won't be all of it. So, but at this planning stage, then we can't define that, because it will require the you know, that final technical detail at a much higher level. But we have got that condition to sort out to discharge. We've also then, obviously, you're suggesting that we have a management in terms of the traffic, so we can look at what kind of vehicles that would remove that soil. And I'm sure as part of that, then John could obviously work out how many vehicles we should be looking at in terms of that thing. But I think what we can be clear is it's not removing all that soil. So there will, some of it will obviously be retained on site.
Chairman, this committee is not unaccustomed to, you know, arguing the toss over eaves heights, and unless I've completely missed them in the report, that still hasn't been forthcoming. You know, in terms of, you know, how much soil will be removed, I presume that will have to be removed, you know, by a company with a license to remove spoil from, you know, so that's going to be covered elsewhere. But in terms of, you know, the simple question, you know, we've often sat in here, you know, talking about eave sites because of the impact on neighbours, and you know.
Anna, I think a lot of these mitigations are covered under the conditions.
Yeah, we do have a sort of predicted eaves height here. So there are some levels. I've obviously pasted this off of things, but there are levels on this drawing that indicate the that where those eaves sit on here. I can't read them off there because they're very small to start with, but there are levels in terms of where we are in terms of those, and they'll obviously be taken from, we've got a topographical survey, so we'll know where the eaves are in relation to those ground levels, etc. at the moment. So that's not going to significantly change in terms of that. In terms of the exact cut and fill and the amount of soil removed, and obviously that's going to be subject to a final calculation. But in terms of the eaves height, then we are at that kind of level here, and the figure is on there. It's just too small for me to read at the moment. But we do have the eaves levels that we want. So in terms of, this is number 91, and there's the ground level there at 91. So you can obviously see, not currently the site slopes down. This will be the highest part here. So it will. So what you will get above the current ground level is this piece of browns, which will then be a grass slope, and then you'll get the level here. So it's not that significantly higher than what the ground level is at 91. So again, here we are at 91 on this section here, section B, which is going up. So again, it goes down. So it's more kind of levelling that through there. So we have got levels. So it's not that we don't know how it's going to relate to the land surrounding it. I think what we don't have is that very precise technical detail that will only come from when the drawings are finally worked out for construction. But obviously that's conditioned.
I'm going to bring Ben in here, please.
It's just it's an important but minor matter. To help out Helen out, I was just going to look at the plans on the website, but unfortunately the website is down, so I can't find those floor levels for you. What I can confirm though is that we've considered them through the process with our senior heritage and design officer, as well as with the planning officers as well, to ensure that we're comfortable with those floor levels, and then ultimately the finished height of the building, to look at the impact it will have on the wider landscape. We're also looking to then condition those plans, so then we're looking at a condition for the finished floor level. So we have considered them in the round. Frustratingly, and I would like to just tell you what those figures are, I just don't have them in front of me at the moment.
Thank you. Is there any more comments for the speakers? Karen?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a point of clarification in terms of the access to the bridleway and ensuring safe access for cyclists, pedestrians during the build. What provisions will be put in place to ensure people are protected in using that?
Yes, you do that.
Yeah, I think as Helen's indicated as part of her presentation, it's a straight run. So it's not like it's got a bend in there and someone's going to get a sudden surprise when the car comes around the corner and they weren't expecting it. You know, you stood at this point here, which is the top of the entrance. You can see right the way down the track. So you certainly be able to see vehicles as they manoeuvre in and out. As part of the construction management plan, there'd be an understanding in relation to the types of vehicles that are entering the site, even insofar as timings with when those would be happening. So there'd be an understanding that, you know, there may be times of the day when those deliveries are happening in the mornings or something like that. We'd go into that level of detail to identify the types of vehicles that would be entering the site and the stages of the build when those manoeuvres are more likely to be happening. So there'd be an understanding maybe at that initial stage when the excavation's happening, but once the excavation's happened and then the structure's being built, there'll be a lot less vehicles in and out of the site. It would just be the construction teams on site, and I think, as was mentioned, yes, they would have the ability to turn within the site, so you wouldn't have vehicles reversing up and down the bridleway. They would be able to make a manoeuvre within the site, leave the site in a forward gear, so they'd be able to clearly see anyone else on the bridleway. And we have had that surveyed. That bridleway from hedge to hedge is 5 metres wide, so the track itself is potentially sort of 3 metres, and you've got a metre either side. And yeah, it would be a case of care and taking caution as vehicles move up and down the bridleway. But likewise, anyone up and down the path would also be probably aware that there's a construction site and just a bit more care is required during that busier time.
If there are no further questions, thank you for your comments. We'll go to general discussion. Eleanor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. When I looked at these papers, I thought, well, it's not a straightforward decision. There were clearly a number of objections which need to be considered. So the first thing I looked at is the principle of development acceptable. It is outside the defined settlement limit and it is going to be on greenfield land, but Policy 7.5 in the newly adopted Greater Norwich Local Plan does allow for small development now of up to 3 dwellings adjacent to the settlement limit. So that's a really key policy to use when if we were to approve it. And also, of course, at the time of application, the council didn't have a 5-year housing land supply. So that has a lot of weight too. So as far as the principle of development goes, I would say it was acceptable. So then I had 3 other questions. The first was the impact on highway safety. The second was whether there's a significant impact on the landscape. And the third is whether this could be considered to be a sustainable development. So in terms of the highway safety, there are clearly concerns, and we've heard all those about the use of a narrow bridleway for access, but Norfolk County Council highways haven't raised an objection. They haven't put in an objection. The Public Rights of Way officer has, so we need to take that into account. But overall, I would say that having heard what I've heard today, there isn't enough evidence that there's going to be sufficient significant impact on the highway to turn this application down on that basis. So moving on to the landscape, there's obviously going to be an impact on the landscape. I mean, previously it's, you know, now it's a green field in a valley, so there will be an impact. But as we've heard, you know, it is going to be set fairly low down into the ground, and the views around won't be, again, I don't think significantly impacted, so I don't think we could turn it down on that basis. And the other thing is about sustainability. I mean, looking at the design, it looks to me like it's a very interesting, well-designed, sustainable building. It's quite an exciting design, actually, and I'd like to see a lot more buildings incorporating similar sustainable design features coming to this planning committee. So I'm very happy with that, and I see that a number of permitted development rights are proposed to be removed. That's in the conditions, and I do agree with that. So on those basis, I'd be happy to support this application. So I'd like to put a proposal in that this application is approved.
Thank you, Eleanor. I'm going to second that. Lana?
Chairman, I broadly agree with what Ellen has said, and I'm actually pleased that the building of, the permission of 3 additional buildings per parish is being utilised by somebody who wants to self-build, which I think is what, well, I know that was the intention of this policy, to enable, local businesses, local people to build houses for themselves and their families. What I would request from you both to incorporate into, your proposal are the amendments and the conditions that we've spoken about pertaining to the construction management period, because I think it's because of the way the bridleway, the access route slopes, because of the issues with highways. I would request that any vehicles only leave the site in a forward gear, because visibility is not great. Highways are not entirely satisfied, and in order not to exacerbate an already slightly precarious situation, I suggest that we do that. And I just want to ask the officers to just be mindful of the eaves height on this building. I understand that there's a lot of there's a bit of give and take, bearing in mind that it's a cut and fill construction, but just to make sure that it doesn't creep up too high because of issues in construction. So those would be my additional comments. So if you're so I'd just politely request that you add the construction management condition into your proposal, please.
I was going to do that, Lana, so thank you very much for your comment. And I think the floor levels are conditioned under number 3 in the condition, so I'm quite happy with that. Do we need to go to full discussion, or can we go straight to the vote? Straight to the vote. I propose that we delegate authority to the Assistant Director of Planning to approve subject to conditions. We have 18 conditions here. I'd like to add 1, a construction management plan to those conditions, which will cover the traffic in and out of the site. All those in favour, please raise your hand.
Sorry, Chair, can I just double check? Eleanor, are you happy with that being added as well? Sorry.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hand.
That's unanimous, Chair, for approval. Oh, delegated authority, sorry, Chair.
Thank you very much. The parties relating to the application may leave if you wish, or you can sit out to for the last application. I propose to go straight to planning appeals. to cover that first, which is hopefully quite quick, and then we'll go to the last application. That's just because Lana has to leave. Yeah. Right, I'm going to hand over to Ben to discuss planning appeals.
Yeah, this won't take long at all, members. We've only received 2 planning appeals since the previous planning committee. One you'll see on your papers here on page 61. Both were delegated decisions and as such thing can come before the members of the committee. One was for demolition of existing bungalow replacement with 2 dwellings. We won't necessarily go into the detail, but the principle of that is that there was 1 plot and suddenly we want to put 2 in, and it's very compact, very contrived development. The second one is an approval in part and refusal in part for a TPO tree that we have. Ultimately, we've allowed certain works to the tree. The appellant is appealing that they want to remove the trees completely. And we've received no decisions back from the inspectorate in the time since the last one, so there's nothing to report.
Nothing.
No, nothing at all.
Right, okay. Are they working?
That's a question for another day.
Yeah. Right, we'll go to application number 4, Acle Academy. Where's Peter?
Where has he gone? He was here.
We just need to wait for the officer.
Sorry, Chair. I don't know where he's gone. Let me in quickly.
Thank you. Peter's going to present the presentation for this application.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So we're on the last item, number 4. So we've got the proposal for the new multi-use sports court with associated fencing at Acle Academy. So the application site, as you would imagine, forms part of the existing land occupied by Acle Academy. Its current use is part of the existing playing fields, although a slightly lesser used part of the site than the more formal area. So the more formal playing fields are in this area, and it's an area of land that projects out towards the east, which is used on occasion, but not necessarily formally laid down as sports pitch at present. The school does benefit from existing tennis courts and hard courts, which are located up towards the north here. And it's worth highlighting that the school does have a wider development plan that this is kind of coming through. So there is potential future proposals for a special needs unit on the existing courts and other development coming forward. However, this application just contains the multi-use courts area. So actually this application should be considered on its own merits, because we can't require through this application that unit comes forward that's going on the existing courts. So I'm mindful that it's happening, but this is assessed on the merits. It stands on its own 2 feet as a application. So as you can see, and as you will have perceived from the comments on the application, we are in quite close proximity to quite a large number of residential dwellings. It's the more sensitive side of the site where it abuts existing residential properties on the north, south and east of the site. And if I move down onto this image, you can see how it sits within the school itself, with the more formal playing area set out to the south there, and this area located over towards the east. We have had Sport England consultation, as we are required to do when areas of playing field are taken up by development. So under their technical standards, it is classed as a loss of playing field because we are building for construction of whilst it's recreation and non-playing field use on the site. However, they have confirmed that the use for hard courts and multi-sports does fit within one of the exemptions that they have for loss of playing field land. So in this instance, they've not objected to the application on that basis. Moving down into the design of the site itself, it's set out with, so it could contain 3 tennis courts, 2 basketball court layouts overlaid. So as a multi-sport area, there's a number of different uses that could be there, and something in particular picked up from briefing yesterday. I got extra detail from the Council Environmental Services Officer this morning that as a multi-sports court, that a range of different sports was considered in his response, and that is the reason for the hours of use condition, and that he's satisfied with no further restrictions other than the hours of use in this particular case, which I'll build on that in a little while. So the site is is bounded by quite a lot of vegetation on the east side and to the northeast, and that is particularly relevant in regards to its impact on the neighbour to the east, and it's more open to the neighbours to the south. The original proposal, the boundary of the court itself, came over towards these trees a lot more than this plan shows. So through the application process, that has been, we initially sought to see whether we could move it elsewhere on the site, but that was going to have a greater impact on the formal sports pitch area of the school field and prevent necessary use of some of that area. So in order to find a solution, it was shifted over as far as it could go and then slightly reduced in internal area just to move it away from that boundary, in order to protect the vast majority of those trees. The 2 proposed for a removal are Leylandia and a laurel, so they're not a significant detriment to the character of the site through their removal. The more sensitive sort of native species trees, there's some oaks and beech along there, are proposed to be protected and retained. This particular plan shows that tree protection fencing in this dashed line as part of the construction. And for context, when I come to the photos in a moment, this other dashed line that follows the perimeter here is the ball catch netting. So that is the higher part of the boundary proposal, 6 metres in height. And then the other dark line around here is the more solid fencing at lower level. So we've got example materials, so your fairly normal lower level metal fencing, and then the ball netting, whilst it will have the vertical structures, is the more softer material. There's a range of different colours and shades, and that's proposed to be agreed by condition, exactly which that is, although given the boundary vegetation, green is probably the most appropriate colour in this particular context. Moving on to views of the site, this is looking from inside the school towards the south, so you can see the adjacent neighbours there with the more open boundaries, and then we come round to the slightly more vegetated boundary to the east. And then looking directly to the east, this particular tree here is the main one to be removed, but we're retaining. This is a beech tree, and then that's the large oak, so they're all being retained, so it's only the 2 smaller ones in this particular location. And again, a wider view of that boundary. Of course, we've got a residential dwelling immediately behind that oak tree on that side that you can't see, but it's in relatively close proximity. And then just a view in the summer when that side of the site is fully vegetated, or trees are fully in leaf. So thought I'd just demonstrate why we've got the footpath access for the school running down the side here. There are a number of services running under that footpath, which is preventing the area being moved across any further than this. So we have explored how far we could get it, and we've hit the buffer as far as we can. So in relation to the wider proposal, initially when it came in, there are significant concerns raised by the local residents in terms of noise on the boundary. We do have to bear in mind it is a playing field use currently, so there is an element of noise it could generate, but it is acknowledged that the addition of fencing and hard courts do create a different noise to a pure playing field. You've got the noise from balls hitting the fencing and such like that. So whilst I think it was the school's original hope that they could use it perhaps out of hours and at weekends, consultation with the council's environmental services team, that has been reduced down and recommended for condition to be used between 8 AM and 6 PM, so ever so slightly longer than school hours, but that sort of accommodates after school clubs and things like that. That's Monday to Friday, no weekend use. That is in and out of term time. We did consider whether to limit it to term time only, but when looking at the tests for providing planning conditions, if you could generate noise on there at 3 PM on a Thursday in September, there's no real difference in material planning terms as to doing that at 3 PM on a Thursday in August. So the use conditions is Monday to Friday, 8 AM to 6 PM, and that's all year round. So that's why the times have been condensed quite tightly around that general school time. I mean, it aligns with general working hours as well, to be considered quite reasonable in this particular case. So I think it's acknowledged that there will be an increase in noise on this site, but with those conditions with the existing use of the school site, and the principle through both local and neighbourhood plans of supporting the school and its provision of its function, that impact has been mitigated sufficiently to be acceptable in a planning context. Other than that, conditions include the tree protection plan as a primary function, because that will act to help in terms of both visual impact of that netting, because it is quite high, and also help with the noise attenuation as well to some degree. So with those on, the recommendation is for approval with conditions.
Thank you, Peter. Any points of clarification from the officer? No? Thank you. I'll go to Lana, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, with regret, I have to very much object to this application, and I am going to ask you to refuse it, based on the impact on the neighbouring residents. So if you look at the site plan, the property immediately to the east is the one in my ownership, but is currently occupied by my mother-in-law, who has Alzheimer's disease and significant mental health issues pertaining to that necessitate, amongst her other medication, to have medication to regulate her anxiety, because unless that is regulated, and she is particularly sensitive to noise, she becomes violent and aggressive. She is currently cared for at home, being monitored by the Julian Hospital, and her mental health condition is not considered stable. The property across from the garden of number 21, where you see that multitude of houses there, is a housing with care scheme for adults with severe learning difficulties. Again, this cohort of 10 residents are significantly affected by noise, and having a multi-use games area from the garden of my mother-in-law's bungalow to Nigel is where this multi-use games area is going to be, with balls knocking against metal fencing from 8 AM till 6 PM, which, by the way, the school does shut at 3:30 PM, so I have no idea why that's been extended to that long. To the south, you'll see that there's a number of houses, little terraces. Those houses belong to Clarion Housing Association and are used, again, to house some of our most vulnerable residents, because you will know from your casework that only people in financial hardship and probably associated mental health conditions get housed in our housing stock from the list. So the statement that this is surrounded by extremely vulnerable residents is an understatement, and I'm asking you to refuse this application because of its adverse impact on the mental health condition of some of the most vulnerable residents in my village. Because I own number 23, I have been prevented to negotiating an outcome with the school, the parish council and the district to ensure that the sports facilities, which are sorely needed by the academy, are properly situated and no meaningful sequential test has taken place. I'd also like to remind you that on the 28th of March this year, you unanimously supported the Greater Norwich Local Plan, which you probably didn't know, the first policy that relates to ACOL is a policy pertaining to the site immediately to the west of the school, which necessitates a delivery of land to the school adjacent to the boundary where the new sports hall is going to happen, where the new SEND unit is going to be, where all the major facilities for the academy are going to be constructed. So that land is forthcoming. The land is currently in the ownership of Norfolk County Council, and Repton Homes have been reliably solid in delivering for the local community, and they will deliver for the school also. In the short term, obviously this development isn't going to happen tomorrow. In the short term, the multi-use games area could be relocated 2 minutes down the road to the ACOL Recreation Centre, where an existing mugger already stands empty during the school hours. So there is an interim option for the school. Because I've had a pecuniary interest, I have been under the threat of criminal prosecution, prevented from negotiating this outcome. I do not wish to impede the progress of the academy. The parish council are, with my encouragement, ploughing their SIL money into a new sports hall for this school, which is sorely in need of additional facilities. But what I'm asking you here now is to refuse this application, because the amenity of local residents, and I mean severely sensitive, vulnerable residents, the most vulnerable in my community, is going to be impacted by this development. And so I'm asking you to add weight to that consideration in the safe knowledge that as soon as I am unfettered by this application, I will assist everybody to ensure that all the facilities that the academy has in mind are delivered, but in a better position so that people in my village are not adversely affected. Thank you.
Thank you, Lana. Any points of clarification from Lana, please? No? Thank you, Lana. If you'd like to maybe sit behind, and I'll ask Craig Nicholson to please come forward. Sorry, Craig Nicholson White. I'm really sorry you've had to wait 3 hours to have your say.
So thank you, Chair, thank you, Vice. Good afternoon, Committee. My attendance today was purely for clarification questions, but I just feel that it's a need to bring to the attention of the whole project, the front tennis courts. We've tried to deliver. Sorry, I'm off the cuff. I've not got no notes because I was just going to do questions. We've tried every possible avenue about where we could put the SRB and where we could put the tennis courts, and trying to keep everyone happy with Sport England. Norfolk County Council have identified the front current tennis courts as being the best place for the specialist resource base, solely for people with autism spectrum disorder. So we'd be very fortunate on having that in the local community. And in doing so, we'd lose 4 courts, and we could only fit in 3 courts. So we're going to lose a court, but in the grand scheme of things for the community, the specialist resource base is everything for us. And in order to obtain the specialist resource base, we've had to move the courts. in order to keep that within the education sector. So there's nowhere else on site basically that we can teach tennis, netball, basketball, etc. And I think it's also the site has moved on so far, and I'd like not to hold back on the fact that the school was in special measures not so long back, and through the strength of the staff on site and also the Wensum Trust, we've managed to get that to good, and we want to keep thriving forward and providing all these wonderful things for the school. So yeah, I'm not going to take up the whole 5 minutes because it was just an off the cuff, but any clarification questions I'm happy to take.
Any questions? Karen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just picking up on your point about that's the only other possibility on the site to have the courts. What would be the implication for the school if the courts were situated off-site?
Obviously, the implications is times away from lessons. So obviously, having it on site, we'd then have to sort out transportation to what we have already in Acre with the mugger and the tennis courts, etc. There'd be time lost between lessons. And yeah, basically, in order to get off site, there would be quite some time lost, I'd get.
Can I ask a question? Lana mentioned a mugger which is being underutilised, apparently 2 minutes away. Is that not possible to use that one?
We'd need to do some work on where it is and what the availability is to what the school would need. Yeah, there's potential to use that, but obviously for the school, we've got all the sports facilities where we need them. There's no safeguard and risk on keeping everyone in the rear of the school rather than going outside of the school, even at the front of the school. Best place for the kids and safeguarding is at the rear.
Adrian, please.
I just wondered if you need to consider any other locations on the site to house those courts. Obviously, there's additional land currently available, isn't there, on the western side? So I just wondered if you consider any other sites.
Yeah, so personally, this is the first I've heard about this land myself. Whether the CEO and stuff could give any more information on that. The only task I was set was obviously the tennis courts, the SRB, and future plan on the west side. I'm unaware.
Okay, I'm going to bring Peter in, please.
Yeah, I think in terms of the GNLP allocation, Lana is correct that there is a residential allocation directly next to the site, and that is required to bring forward land for the school. The difficulty with this current application is there is no active application for that site. So therefore, in terms of actual material planning consideration in this particular case, I know it's in county use. They have a good track record in such things. That site still may not come forward. There may be unforeseen circumstances that affect the housing market, affect anything else. We can't rely on that to mitigate this particular application because it's not a material, it's not an active application, let alone a delivered site for the school to use yet. So that is some way off in terms of making its way through the planning system and delivery of the site potentially. It's acknowledged it's there. We just can't use that in terms of the assessment for this particular application.
Are there any further clarifications from the speaker? Or is this for a question for the speaker, Ken?
Yes, in a wider way, yes, because I think...
Okay, do you want to go ahead?
Because
Want to go to general discussion? Anybody got any comments? Karen, please.
Chairman, does Councillor Hempson need to leave? Oh, sorry, she's here.
It's just picking up on that point and understanding to what extent there has been conversations with Norfolk County Council in potentially expediting and bringing that forward is one question. The other, I probably should declare an interest as a county councillor with some responsibility for children's services. So I didn't realise we were going to get quite into this level of detail, but on that basis, I think I need to declare an interest. Thank you.
Yeah, there's no, in relation to this particular proposal, we've not necessarily engaged with the county in terms of the delivery of that site. So in the last month, during the course of the application, the GNLP has been adopted, so that process is likely to start if they wish to bring it forward fairly soon. But I think that, as a housing-led development, that is ultimately going to be guided by the housing market and their delivery of the site. It's only through the housing development that the land for the school will be brought forward. So it's not the as I guess unhelpful as it perhaps is. It's not the help to the school that's going to be the key factor in that development. It's a housing allocation first and foremost. So you know, in an ideal world, then we'd have that available to factor in all of these other school developments to put it into, but at the moment we don't. The applications come in within the school grounds and said we've got to assess it on its own merits. It's got to stand on its own 2 feet. There has been that assessment with environmental services in relation to the neighbours. I think it's a particularly sensitive interaction in this particular case because we have got vulnerable residents adjacent. Obviously got the community benefit of the school. We want to support both. There's got to be a compromise somewhere, and I think the compromise that's sat in this particular application is that limitation on the hours of use, and that's as reasonable as we can get in this context.
I think it is a difficult one with you're saying vulnerable residents next to the site. Is there a firm commitment from Norfolk County Council for the SEN building as such? Because that is really why they are moving the tennis courts, isn't it?
Yes, and there's a very strong desire for it, but as I covered at the beginning of the assessment, that's not part of this application. So again, this has got to be acceptable whether that comes forward or not. And much like the allocation on the side, both of those aspects could come together to make something quite beneficial, but at the moment it's this proposal on its own merits, assessing against the impacts on those neighbours.
I've got Karen first, then Vivian, and then Adrian, please.
This is a really difficult one for the reasons that you've just outlined. And I guess because it's only very recently that the that the plan was adopted, and as we've heard from Councillor Emsell, that parcel of land, what I did hear Councillor Emsell say, and I don't know if this is correct, well, I don't, that came out wrong. I have no reason to doubt it, but I don't know the detail, is that that land is being promoted by Repton Homes. Is that what was said? If so, that's a wholly owned company of the county council who we're hearing is wanting to deliver the SRB. So all kind of feel interlinked. That is there an opportunity to defer this application, to have further conversations with the council to unpick this and see if there is a better site next door? That was where my head is thinking at the moment.
I completely take the point. I think it's well made by both yourself and Councillor Hempsell. The challenge I suppose I'd put forward, or the challenge that I can view, is the discussions that we might have with the county council might last a month, they might last 6 months, they might last a year, and that's not criticising the county council at all. That's just the nature of development and how development works. And from the background I've come from recently, I can see that applications can take best part of 18 months to 2 years to even come forward. And what we're faced with at the moment, which I'm sure the applicant would suggest is the correct way to look at it, is that there's a need for this facility now. They don't have them at the school, and as Peter said as well, we are still considering on its merits. So whilst I'm not pushing you away from that, because it's fully within the member's gift to defer the application, I don't know that it would take us much further down the line.
I'm a bit bamboozled on this one, I must admit. Yeah, Peter, do you want to say something?
You say, I think in terms of exploring the alternative options, we have looked at other areas of the site, but as was kind of hinted on, Sport England do seek protection of playing fields. So in terms of that context, it's the least sensitive part of the playing field. We could get a different response from Sport England if we were to take up the actual formal playing pitches area of the site. In that context, if they were to object, we would not be able to approve. We'd have to refer to the Secretary of State to override their objection. So we're somewhat constrained by, I guess we're all in between a rock and a hard place, really. We've got the sensitive users on one side, we've got the protected playing fields on the other side, we've got an area that may or may not come forward that we can't really take into account on the edge. So, but I think to emphasise the point that this application is assessed on its own merits, the Council's Environmental Services team are happy that with both the lighting condition, I forgot to mention earlier, but is proposed to be used, of no external lighting, and with those hours of operational restriction, that it is satisfactory. And I think while we can't take into account personal circumstances, the houses to the south are actually designated sheltered housing, so that vulnerability in that particular boundary can be taken into account, and that has been taken into account in the assessment by Environmental Services. So,
does sheltered housing cover elderly residents? But does it cover people with mental health issues as well? That's the problem I have. I don't know if it's just the elderly there or if it's people with more severe.
I haven't looked at the particular planning condition on that site, but that at the moment that is what that particular area does specialise in. Whether the planning permission or legal agreements around that particular site allow a wider occupancy, I'm not sure.
I mean, I do sympathise with Lana's predicament with her mother-in-law, but I think we need to look at it as a planning application rather than letting our hearts rule our heads, to be honest. Yeah. I've got Ken and then Adrian. Oh, sorry, Pippin. Yes, of course you did. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I respect what Councillor Hampson said. I'm sorry for her. But, you know, there is a playing field there. And people are, when they play, they make sound, you know, and I don't know how much merit we can give on the noises and all, you know. So, and also we need to encourage people to play. Nowadays, the kids are going very remotely. They are always behind the computer, behind the mobile and all. So we need to encourage them to play. Let them, you know. So it's an opportunity for them to play. So in my perspective, you know, I would like to approve this condition.
Are you proposing approval?
I'm proposing that.
You would like to approve?
I would like to propose this.
Okay. Adrian.
Yeah, I suppose, look at this as a bit of, as Ben was saying, it's a bit of like dominoes that line them up, because I see what's happened here. They want to move the tennis courts, to free up the land to put on the SRB and build that important resource base for Central, which is much needed in this county. We've got an epidemic of it in this county nowadays. So I think the problem of deferring would lead to a situation where we don't free up the land so they can put an application in to build the SRB and get on with building it. So I think I know we'd like to put it in a more sensitive location for some of the nearby residents, but I think by deferring that and holding off and trying to find a different location on the site, you could run the risk. I don't know how the SRB is being funded, how it's being built. If we put any kind of, if we defer this for a period, say 6, 12, 18 months, that might put at risk the ability, either delay provision of the SRB, or maybe, I don't know how the funding is, so I think from a planning perspective, and I echo some of the thoughts that Bibbin said, I used to live adjacent to a school playing field, and I did find comments from the parish council saying very disturbing to neighbours. It's a noticeable noise, kids playing on a school playing field. This might be slightly different because obviously a mugger, but yeah, maybe some of the sensitivities, some of the nearby residents in sheltered housing or people with mental difficulties, it might be seen as that as disturbing. But I think the fact that with amended plans now, on the second consultation, the parish council have presented no objections, I'd second Bibbin's proposal as well. Yeah.
Ken, did you wish to speak?
Well,
Okay, shall we go to the vote? All those in favour of the application, please. Oh, sorry, Karen. I thought you were saying you were going to...
Thank you. I wanted to just explore if it's a possibility. As I say, it's a difficult one. On balance, delivery of the SRB, I think, is essential and wouldn't want to delay that. So on that basis, I'll be happy to support.
Okay, all those in favour, please raise your hand.
Chairman, that's unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you so much for enduring 3.5 hours of planning this morning.
all that land stuff is there.
Yeah, I hope